Okay, welcome back to another episode of Expected by Whom. Today it's just me today. Prashanth is taking a much-deserved vacation after a hectic kind of couple months, as we talked about on prior episodes with Prashanth. And so today, though, I'm very happy to be joined by University of Michigan women's club hockey coach Jenna Trubiano, and joins us today. Who I think you're down in Fort Worth right now, or where
I
are
am.
you? So.
I'm in Fort Worth for work. I'll be heading back to Detroit tonight. Thank you so much for having me.
So I wanted to kind of start off right away because one of the things that we've been obviously women's hockey in Michigan's been a big topic in the state recently, but one of the things that I think you've been running around. You've had ACHA Nationals last month. You were at Board of Regents meeting where there was some exciting news and potential things we talked about earlier, but at the same time, I know, because I've spoken to you for other stories in the Detroit news, that you have a full-time job in the day-to-day. And I was wondering if you could kind of just kind of off the bat, kind of give people kind of quick insight, slice into what goes into being the women's club hockey coach at Michigan right now, because it's not, you have another job that you have to do to pay the bills effectively.
I do. Yeah. Obviously, I'm here in Fort Worth for work, for my full-time job, and that does take priority. I do enjoy my full-time job and, coaching hockey. I do spend a lot of time, with all the off-ice stuff, recruiting. We had exit meetings a few weeks ago. We had the Regents meeting, like you mentioned. We had a prospects gate mixed in there the past couple of weeks, and students have found out their admission decision from the University of Michigan within the last few weeks as well. So I would say majority of my time after work is spent on University of Michigan women's hockey. It's something I'm passionate about, so I don't really consider it work. It does require a lot of time and obviously a lot of time on the weekends as well, but for me it's something that's worth it.
How'd you kind of get into the coaching aspect of it? Obviously, you played for the school, you played for the program when you were there. You came through. I believe you played for both Little Caesars and Bell Tire. If I looked coming up, but how did coaching become a passion for you? How did that kind of jump onto your radar?
Yeah, it's kind of an odd story, I would say. I never had a female head coach growing up. So I played for Bell Tire through my 14U years, and then I tried out for Little Caesars, and I made the team, and that's when I was like, whoa, I want to play hockey in college. That's when I had the realization that this was going to open up so many doors for me. And, I committed to hockey full-time. I also ran track in high school, but that was an off-season thing. And I always loved hockey. I had gotten started in the game pretty late. I didn't start till I was about 10 or 11. Nobody in my family played. We were all trying to navigate it, ourselves. And this is before Instagram and really emails. So I think it was, the My Hockey Now magazines. That's how we got a lot of our information. And I remember I would save a lot of those because they had the posters in them. But, we were all just trying to navigate it together. And I'm super thankful that I think we did a pretty good job. But I always loved the game. The Red Wings meant a lot to me. They still do. And got to watch a lot of their games, learned a lot from Hockey Night in Canada. And I ended up at the University of Michigan to further my academic career and obviously contribute to the women's ice hockey program. And I knew at some point I would graduate and enter the real world, but I also wanted to stay involved in hockey, although I didn't know what capacity. So throughout my time at Michigan as a student, I was attending USA Hockey coaching education programs. So I got my level 1, then I got my level 2, got my level 3, got my level 4. So by the time, I graduated, I was a level 3 or level 4. And I had helped out at the Ann Arbor Ice Cube with AHA and some other volunteering opportunities. But when I graduated from Michigan, I accepted a full-time job in Ann Arbor, which is the company that I currently work at now. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to start the 9 to 5, that's what you do. You graduate and you enter the workforce. And I did that for about a week. And then I was like, I'm so bored. I need something else in my life. And fortunately, there was an assistant coach position open with the program. And Gary Quiddiquit, Ned Glisson, who were coaches with the women's hockey program at Michigan at the time, were really pushing me to come back. And I came back, and it really just fit seamlessly into my schedule. It was everything I had ever known. I could manage my time really well. And I think it was March 2021. So during that COVID season that we had, the team elected board had reached out to me and offered me the head coaching position at the University of Michigan, and I accepted it. So I just finished my third season, but something I'm really passionate about is obviously having female coaches. Like I never had a model to look up to. So I'm trying to navigate, okay, like who do I want to be? What do I want to represent? Excuse me. And really create or help create a role model, hopefully a role model for other students or other hockey players in general.
So even when you played for like the Caesars 19U or 16U team, you still had only male coaches at that time?
We had female assistant coaches. We never had a female head coach.
Okay. Were you the first female head coach for the Michigan program?
I was not.
Okay. And I know it feels like a question that I feel like too many times I've heard over the past couple weeks in conversations that you and I have had, where there's times where it's like, it's 2024, we shouldn't be having this conversation, but right. Unfortunately we are at times. And for you, what does it mean when you look at kind of that role model space? And you and I have talked before. I have a 5-year-old daughter who's starting to play hockey, and I took her to the PWHL game, and she was thrilled and loved it. And so for you to kind of be in that opposite, kind of have that perspective that I never had, where you're 10 years old going to learn to play the game, and the head coach is someone who's different, someone who's not is a male coach. Like, how much, when you kind of think about that perspective and now as a coach, what are some of the things that come to mind for you? Just kind of, I'm sure you didn't get into coaching to be a role model, but I'm sure that comes to mind now when you think about it.
Yeah, it's something that's also been, I would say, somewhat of a trend.
Yeah.
Within the state of Michigan, and this might tie into another question you have later.
Yeah.
But part of the problem that the state of Michigan has, and I just listened to the Adam Nightingale show that you posted, and one of the first things he said was, the state of Michigan is a great hockey state.
Yeah.
And for men it is, but for girls and women it's really not. Yeah. Like, it's drastically different. And within our state, because there's no, Division I programs where these elite AAA programs are pushing players, like, that's why they're developing them. Like, you're going to go play at Wisconsin, you're going to play at Ohio State, you're going to play at Harvard, you're going to play at Yale. And those players leave, and then they don't come back. So there's this broken cycle of, like, a female coaching shortage. Like, you develop these players, really good girls programs in the state of Michigan, and then you send them out of state, and then they establish lives, and they don't come back. So who's there to coach the next generation? Like, there's just this broken cycle. So that's really what's in my head now, is, like, I'm looking around, and there's a lot of turnover in coaching, even at the ACHA level. But yeah, it just seems like this broken cycle of, we develop really strong elite girls hockey players, and then they leave the state, and a lot of them don't come back. And there's just, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it other than it's a broken cycle, and hopefully that will be fixed eventually. But yeah, it's like it means a lot now to have the position that I'm currently in, having played for the program and really understanding what the program is all about. And we're turning 30 next year. I've been involved for a decade at this point, which seems crazy to say. I couldn't have imagined anything else, honestly. It's special to have lived in Michigan my entire life and to contribute in ways that I'm able to contribute in, whether that's coaching, whether that's educating, whether that's advocating. So I really want to use my platform and my voice really to educate people that are willing to listen, because there are some things that need to change. As you and I have talked about, many different things that I feel and you feel strongly about. So that's where I'm at now. Like, I'm comfortable with my voice. It's taken me a couple of years to find it because this is such a predominantly male space. But yeah, it's very similar to the trade show I just attended for work. It's a predominantly male space. And I feel comfortable at those shows because hockey's very much the same way. But I was with one of my coworkers who's a woman, and we were looking around the trade show and we're like, wow, there's really not a lot of diversity here. Like, this should change because it would change the industry as well. And there are a lot of similarities in hockey. Like, if you get more voices and more people involved that have different perspectives and different experiences, things are going to change for the better.
I believe one of the things that you've told me, I think you've said it's even in the charter for the women's club team to kind of promote and help eventually someday do everything within your power to kind of bring a Division One varsity program. And obviously I've spoken to Denise Illich recently about her comments at that, and we'll talk a little bit more about those recent events in a second here. But first I wanted to kind of go through has that been part of the charter? We're in year 30 for the program. Has that been something that's been a day one charter thing? You've been part of the program for 10 years. Like, what's kind of been the evolution of, we go from for this club team, this club program, going from being a place where women can play games, organize these games and the schedule and everything, to we can try to do something greater with the long-term vision here?
I believe it dates back even further than my tenure with the program. So the program was founded in 1995. Sue McDowell was involved in that, and she's still actively involved in Washtenaw County in growing the girls' game. But I think it was 96 or 97, right before the 98 Olympics, where women's hockey was going to compete in their first Olympic games. There was a proposal for Michigan to support a varsity women's hockey program. And it was proposed by the non-varsity club level program and its co-founders. And it was around the same time that, Ohio State, Wisconsin, those schools recognized women's ice hockey as an emerging sport. So that was really the first and initial push. And obviously that did not happen. But there's really never been a formal drive ever since that moment. Obviously, like, if I go out and recruit and I'm wearing Michigan stuff, the first question I always get is, is Michigan getting a varsity program? Or, I didn't know Michigan has a team. Like, we do. We're ACHA Division I, and we offer great opportunities for students that want to compete both academically and athletically. But it's the number one question, hands down, that I get every single time. So there's always been conversations about it, but I think where we're at now, to have the support and advocacy of Denise Illich, somebody that is on the board of regents who has a close connection to hockey, specifically the Little Caesars program, which is a program I was developed through. It obviously means a lot, and I'm really excited to see where this takes us. Obviously, I know you had talked about the PWHL game, and I was at that game as well. And I still can't describe the feeling that I had, like being in that building and seeing like how full it was and how many young girls or just young kids were there wearing hockey jerseys and excited to be at a professional women's hockey game for two out-of-market teams. Like, I could have never fathomed that 10 years ago. Not even 5 years ago, honestly, with all the PWHPA and the PHF. I didn't know how that was going to end up. But, yeah, I really think that now's the time, and Ohio State just won another national championship too. So anybody that wears Block M, they know about it. And when they won 2 years ago, that was, another check mark in my timeline of how everything's evolved, honestly, because everybody does not like Ohio State and Ann Arbor. So I was rooting for them because I knew it would kind of cause a ruckus on campus. But it's sad that I have to root for Ohio State.
With kind of this process, and we've talked before a little bit for written stories about kind of to see kind of really one of the big pushes, right, that was lacking was, to poorly phrase this, basically someone who actually had the power to make this happen, right? Like there's been lots of former players who were born and raised in Michigan who had to go play their college hockey elsewhere, who playing in the PWHL, who have spoken about it. You've had, I've heard hockey people in Michigan talk about it, but it really kind of needed someone's voice, like Denise Illich's. It needed someone else who actually had the power to push things. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes gets lost in all of this, right? Where there can be a groundswell, but until somebody who has the ability to, I want to see a feasibility study that will actually move the needle for the AD and the president, right? When it kind of came to speaking with Denise and it came to looking for that spot, what was that kind of like in your conversations with her and your kind of interactions with her and for your players to kind of hear when this kind of finally happens and gets suggested?
Yeah, my relationship with her, we were connected maybe a little over a year ago now. And for me, it's always been about educating and advocating. Because I've described this, I live in a women's hockey bubble. I live in a hockey bubble, but I really live in a women's hockey bubble. Like, all of my social media is just women's hockey and women's sports now, which is great, and I love it. But, like, I know how much work this state and, any university, like, if we were to have any NCAA Division I programs in the state of Michigan, how successful they would be. But there are some people that don't live in the same bubble that don't understand that this is a huge opportunity that is being missed. So to have somebody like Denise Illich that understands hockey and women's hockey and can look at the numbers and say, wow, 7 men's D1 teams and 0 women. 0 opportunities for women in our state. And, I mean, the numbers really say a lot themselves. So, like, again, it's more about educating and advocating, like, hey, here are the numbers. Here's also 2 players that are from within 30 minutes of Ann Arbor that went to Wisconsin. One of them was a Patty Kazmaier finalist, led the NCAA in points as a sophomore, and also scored the game winner last year in the national championship as a freshman. And that's Kirsten Sims. And then Cassie Hall, who's from South Lyon, who had played for Little Caesars her entire career, went to Wisconsin, and led the rookies in scoring. Like, those to me are 2 prime examples. Not to say everybody wants to come to Michigan, but for students to have an opportunity in their home state to play Division I ice hockey. And I've heard it from my former teammates as well that have played on the East Coast, or they've played, in Minnesota or Wisconsin. Like, heck yeah, I would have gone to Michigan, hands down. But because there was no opportunity, they automatically crossed it off their list. And I was kind of the same way too until I had applied and gotten it. And I was looking out of state, and for me, academically, I was looking at schools that fit what I wanted, and I had applied to Michigan and got in. I was like, oh, like, this is a really good school. Like, I like this a lot. And I took a tour of campus, and it checked all the boxes for me, what I wanted as both a student and an athlete. So I think a lot of people just cross it off their list because it doesn't have everything that they want. So again, not to say every single student from the state of Michigan would come to the University of Michigan, but providing Regent Denise Illich with that information, that's really all my role was. And, she's a hockey person, and she can tell non-hockey people, like, hey, this is a problem, and we want to change that.
And it's not even just people who live in the state of Michigan. I was obviously being around the Red Wings quite a bit. I talked to JT Comfer about it the other day. Obviously, his sister Jessie is someone who they're from the Chicago area, but Jessie went to go play at both the Wisconsin and BU. And I was talking to JT about it, and he's been one of the players who's been one of the men's players has been pretty supportive, obviously. And he brought up, and he someone who went and played at Michigan. And he said there's something where when he went through the recruiting process and your family and you talk about things, Jessie told him that if there was a team at Michigan, she would have definitely considered it. It would have been on her list, but it's something so it's not just the state of Michigan too. Like it's kind of the whole draw of the program and everything would be kind of an instant fit from my read on it. And it's, the other thing that's just been interesting doing my own research, having spoken to you, having spoken to other regents and everything like that, it's kind of one of those, like, there's not from a Michigan varsity women's hockey program, there's not a conference question. There's not a recruiting question. There's not, yes, there would be probably a facility upgrade question at some point to make things work, but you're missing all of the, well, this is why reason when you look at it, right? That's kind of one of probably the most jarring things when you have that. And it's the reason we have that. Well, there's 7 men's teams, Division I varsity teams, and no women's teams. It's kind of, that's been my own kind of fascinating read on it to see that. When you look at kind of how things go now, I want to kind of quickly pivot to the here and now and something, because you mentioned recruiting. And I think I'm going to have some listeners or viewers, depending on how they view this, who don't know how a college club team works, right? So when you talk about recruiting and bringing players in, take us through a little bit what that looks like in the here and now for at the club level, the ACHA level, because it's not like you can go and be handing out scholarships and things like that when people typically hear the word recruiting.
Yeah, this is this is a tough question for me because I just finished my 3rd application cycle as head coach at the University of Michigan, and my recruiting process at Michigan was, oh, you got in? All right, show up at tryouts and try out for the team in September. Okay. I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody on the team. I guess I'll just figure it out. And what we're trying to get away from, and because there's so much interest in our program now, and in the University of Michigan in general, what our recruitment process really looks like now is, as students are interested in applying, I'll have conversations with them. I'll usually set up an intro call and, hey, tell me more about you. Here's a little bit about me. Here's a bit about our program. Like, do you have any questions? Here are the application dates. I really encourage students in their senior year to apply for the November 1st early action deadline because Michigan is so competitive. I just saw a statistic this morning, 98,400 first-year applicants, which is insane. 10% or almost a 12% increase over last year. So it's extremely competitive, but I encourage students to apply early action. And I'll continue to track students throughout the application process. I don't have access to their application and I can't flag them for admissions and say, hey, this student would be a great fit for us because we are a club level program. The students have to report their decision back to me and I essentially track it in a spreadsheet. And with admissions, because it was so competitive this year, a lot of students were waitlisted. And I've read about some reasons for that. My understanding is that Michigan doesn't know what their yield's going to be because of the FAFSA deadline changing. But we don't need to get into that. But basically, students need to be able to get in on their own to the University of Michigan before we can offer what we call a contingent commitment. And that's really a verbal commitment between me representing the program and the student athlete saying like, hey, we believe you're a great fit for us, both on and off the ice. And when it comes time to tryouts in late August, early September, we need you to be prepared. So we don't have any letters of intent. We don't do anything ourselves as a program. But for logistical reasons and for students that have a strong interest in our program and athletically and with their character would fit in well with us, we do offer contingent commitments. And we have to order helmets, jerseys, gloves, all of those things to make sure that they fit properly and that we have them for the start of the season because, as you probably know, there are a lot of supply chain issues, especially post-pandemic. So what I've been getting a lot recently is students wanting commitments before they even apply. And that's something I don't think we'll ever do at our current level because I have no control over the admissions process. It's really up to the student and up to the admissions office to determine who gets in. There are ways I think students can make their application stand out, but ultimately it's extremely competitive. I'll be really curious to see what the percentage of students admitted this year was because something that Michigan is working through really right now. They're building some new housing. But for first year students, they provide housing or they offer housing for first year students. So that's really restricting the number of students that they can admit because they have to be able to provide housing to every first year student. Something that has been trending the past couple of years. So if you've looked through our roster, we have a handful of transfer students, probably more than we've ever had. And that's something I've encouraged students to do. Like, hey, if Michigan is your end goal, like if you want a degree from the University of Michigan, and if you don't get in your first year, you can apply as a transfer. Because as a transfer student, they don't have to provide or guarantee housing. So you have a higher percentage chance of actually getting in. So that's something that I've spoken with students about. But again, because I don't have access to the transfer portal for NCAA athletes, we have 2 players that transferred from Division I programs, Kelsey Swanson from Long Island University and Lucy Hansen from Franklin Pierce. Both students, I had just received an email like, hey, I got into Michigan and I'm coming. It's like, okay, great, perfect. But it would be nice if I, could have conversations with transfer portal athletes and say, hey, like this is an option for you. Like if this is something you're interested in, let's have a conversation about it. But I don't have access to that information. And also with Michigan's deadlines, it makes it a little bit awkward too, because they might, they may have missed a deadline. But yeah, our recruiting process is much different than I would say many NCAA and ACHA programs because Michigan has very strict deadlines and we are no different in that. All of our students go through that admissions process.
It's funny that because I was about to ask about your 2 transfers, just because obviously you look and I was curious of how that came to be. So thank you for kind of the quick backstory, the backstory on them. And when you look at your roster too, and you kind of look at how it's like, I think you had, if I look, you think you had 25 people, 25 players on the roster this year, I think it was, or maybe it was, what?
26.
26, okay.
Yep.
And when it comes to your role as a coach with them, one of the interesting things I think is, as you said earlier in this conversation, you're hired by a player board. I'm sure when you were a player, I don't know if you were part of that board or not, but you were. I'm assuming based off your involvement, you probably were. That's one of the more interesting dynamics, I think, too, where a Division One varsity coach, right? They're hired by the school. They are effectively hired by the school, and they report to the school. You're in charge, but you're also responsible to your players. It's almost like you're kind of like an elected official almost in ways. Like, what's that dynamic like from now having seen it both as a player and now as a coach?
It's definitely something that a lot of people aren't used to. I have the advantage of going through the program myself, and I did serve as the team president, and I also had served as the club sport president during my time as a student, which meant I was president of all the clubs. And I think there were 31 of them at the time. So having that experience has been extremely helpful for me because I understand the nuances of our program, and something that's really important for our program to be successful is one, communication, making sure we're all on the same page and everybody knows what's going on. And the second part of that too is when we make decisions about scheduling, about roster size, about players that, I'm interested in committing to the team. There's always a conversation. So what I'm really excited about is our board for next year. Our president is actually a transfer student, Keegan Gustafson. She'll be a junior from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And she was actually at Villanova for her first year and then transferred to Michigan last year. So she didn't play hockey her first year of college, but she's now our elected team president. And I'm really excited to continue to work with her to grow our program and take that next step for us as we enter our 30th year.
What's schedule building like? Because that's another logistic part that I'm sure you get some help from from ACHA conference affiliation, but no, not at all. Like, take me through that. What that's like.
Yeah, it's for us again. It's one of those things where it requires a lot of patience, just like the application and the recruitment process. But we try to play all of our games at Yost, which is special for our student athletes as well as the teams that want to play us. Usually I communicate with the other head coaches who are also responsible for scheduling and try and piece our schedule together. But because every decision that we make as a program has a financial implication, the budget and the scheduling have to match up. And then it becomes that larger conversation with our student board. And another thing I'm really passionate about with our program, Michigan's obviously a super rigorous school academically, and I would say 90% of our students are involved in something other than hockey on campus, whether that's research, a job on campus, a job off campus, whatever it might be. They're involved in something else, and for them to be successful and to take advantage of the resources Michigan has to offer as a phenomenal research institution and just the people that are there, I truly believe our students need to be on campus as much as possible. They're students first, hockey players second. They all love hockey and they want to compete, but ultimately they need to do what they need to do academically before we can focus on hockey. And we do a pretty good job at balancing that. So when I'm scheduling games or looking to schedule games, we look at the academic calendar. We have some sort of idea of when midterms pick up. They're usually around the same time within a 2-week span. But really making sure our students are set up for success. the more time we're on campus, the more time our students are going to have to, go to the library to study or study with their friends that are in the same class or whatever they have to do. And the more time that we're away, or, if we're leaving Friday to go play somewhere relatively local, like that doesn't make sense to me. Obviously, we are going to have to travel because we're a competitive program, but we try to avoid, the back-to-back travel weekends. When we do travel, we get excuse letters from the university through club sports. And because I'm technically a Michigan volunteer employee and I've gone through like the background check and I represent the university as well, I can proctor exams for students. So when we went to the national tournament, I think there were like 7 or 8 exams that needed to be proctored. So fortunately we had a meeting room, but it was like, me working, but then also trying to figure out when students were taking exams because like I couldn't be on a call and just like trying to manage everybody's time and make sure all the professors were happy with me because that's really important. Like I want them to know like our students are prioritizing their class, and we're doing everything we can to maintain a professional relationship with the university. So those are all things that we do to make sure our students are successful in the classroom first and foremost.
I didn't know that because you and I talked briefly right before the national tournament. I didn't know you were also having to proctor exams there.
Yep.
I knew you had a lot on your plate. I didn't know you were also having to handle that as well. So that's another that's another thing to add to the long list of things that I didn't know that went into all of this. When it comes to for you, and I'll kind of close us out with this one here. As you look at, you've got kind of obviously one foot in one door doesn't make sense because what you're doing sounds like you need 15 feet to do things right now. But you're working on building and helping continue the ACHA program be at its best. At the same time, you've talked to people about the Division I program. What's it like right now? How have you been able to have you been able to find balance of keeping long-term excitement and data? Like how have you been able to kind of balance all that? Like what's your secret to that? Because that I can't imagine is easy right now.
I try to take it one day at a time. So like obviously today I'm in Texas, and I travel back and I'll get to see my uncle who lives here. I'll get to see him today too. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I really just have to take it one day at a time as things come up. I try to take care of them as quickly as possible. Obviously my full-time job is my priority. And that takes, my 40 hours a week away from, time I could be spending on hockey, but I've been fortunate to, I guess, really work on my time management skills throughout my entire youth hockey career, playing for Little Caesars and traveling every weekend and having some really great teammates around me that also had the same passion for academics that I did, still do. And then as a student, obviously time management, with Michigan academics and playing hockey. And now as a coach working full time, it's really the same thing. I don't get a ton of personal time or time to relax, but, I feel like I'm doing what we all need to do, for the current program and a potential future Division I program. So I really take it one day at a time. I love Google Calendar. I kind of live by that. And I know trying to coordinate this with you is a little bit of a mess just because there's some other things going on. So I really appreciate your time and patience with me as well.
Well, no, thank you for coming on and doing this. And we're recording this in April. If you're listening to this and anytime hopefully within about 3 months, we should have the feasibility study at some point within 3 months is in theory, hopefully. That's something that if I remember speaking to Denise and some of the other the regents about that's the timeline. So hopefully within the next 3 to 4 months, we have another piece of actionable information when it comes to women's varsity hockey at the University of Michigan. And in the meantime, thank you so much for joining. And this has been another episode of Expected by Whom. Prashanth will be back for our next episode, but thank you so much to Jenna for coming on. And this has been, I learned a ton during this conversation. It's been a lot of fun. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me.